Okay, have you ever wondered why some people seem to just completely sabotage their own success? It's this fascinating, kind of frustrating puzzle, right? Well, today, we're going to dive into a really powerful idea. To get what you want, you don't just change what you do, you have to change who you are. It's a total identity shift. So let's unpack how that actually works.
And to kick things off, let's look at this classic paradox. The lottery winner who ends up completely broke. I mean, we've all heard those stories. Someone gets handed millions and millions of dollars, and then, poof, gone in just a few years. How on earth does that happen? Well, the answer isn't really about bad financial planning. It's about psychology. And it reveals a fundamental truth about how we're wired.
And this really gets to the heart of it. You see, their bank account changed overnight, just radically transformed. But their self-concept, that deep internal belief about who they are, it stayed exactly the same. They suddenly had a millionaire's bank balance, but they were still operating with a broke person's identity.
Think of it like this. On the inside, they were still running old software, a poverty script that was basically hardwired for scarcity and struggle. And that internal programming, man, it is incredibly powerful. It just works tirelessly in the background, making decisions that will eventually drag your external world, your money, your situation, back into alignment with that old, familiar identity.
So if we really want to understand why this self-sabotage happens, we kind of have to look under the hood at how our brain is wired. And it all comes down to what you could call your brain's internal file cabinet, this hidden code that's running your life pretty much on autopilot. Now, psychologists have a fancy word for these mental frameworks. They call them schema. But honestly, the best way to think about them is as a giant file cabinet in your brain. And there's a file for everything: how to act at a nice dinner, how to recognize a dog, and most importantly, there's a huge, complex file labeled Who I Am. This whole system is designed to let your brain operate efficiently without having to think about every little thing.
And if that Who I Am file is just packed with these limiting beliefs, I'm not good with money, or success is for other people, your brain will automatically, subconsciously, trigger behaviors to make those beliefs come true. It creates this huge psychological conflict. So even with millions sitting in the bank, your mind will work overtime to get rid of the money, just to get back to that familiar, comfortable identity it's always known.
Okay, so we get the problem. Now what's the solution? How do we fix this? Well, it requires a really fundamental shift in how we see ourselves. We have to move from being a passive consumer to an active producer. It's all about shifting from just wanting stuff to actually becoming someone.
We all have these two selves kind of warring within us. The consumer self is obsessed with having things, the fancy car, the big house, the rewards. But an identity built on that, it's incredibly fragile. Real, lasting success is built by the producer self. This is the part of you that focuses on becoming the kind of person who has the skills, the discipline, and the mindset to create and sustain that success from the ground up.
And focusing on that producer self is what helps us avoid a massive pitfall on this journey, the external value trap. This is the danger of letting something outside of you, like your job title or, yes, your bank account, define everything about who you are. Psychologists call this psychological alienation, and wow, is it a fragile way to live. I mean, just think about it for a second. If your entire sense of self-worth is tied up in your job or your net worth, what happens when you lose them? Your identity completely collapses right along with them. You feel like a nobody. So the key, really, is to shift your focus from what you could call foisted value, that's value that other people or society place on you, to intrinsic worth. This is value you build from within. It's things like your integrity, your mindfulness, your wisdom. When your self-worth is anchored in these internal qualities, it becomes unshakable. You're okay whether the money is there or not, because your core value as a person is completely intact. All right, this leads us to our final and maybe most crucial step. How do you make this new identity actually stick? To do that, we can turn to the work of the great psychologist Carl Rogers, who taught that the secret is all about aligning your real self. So, Rogers explained that we all have a real self, that's who you are right now, warts and all, and an ideal self. That's the person you really want to become. The gap between those two, he called that incongruence. And that gap, that's the source of so much anxiety, self-doubt, and that nagging feeling of self-sabotage. It's basically your mind screaming at you, hey, you're not acting like the person you claim you want to be. So closing that gap is a pretty straightforward two-step process. First, you have to start with some honest self-inquiry. Ask yourself the tough questions. Who am I really, underneath all the labels and expectations? And second, and this is the hard part, You have to align your actions with your answer. Every single decision you make, big or small, has to be a vote for the person you are choosing to become. And when your actions and your identity finally line up, you achieve what Rogers called congruence. And when that happens, something absolutely incredible takes place. Success is no longer this thing you're desperately chasing, it becomes a natural byproduct of who you are. Your external world finally starts to reflect your internal reality.
So the ultimate takeaway here is this. Stop waiting for external success to come along and define you. The change has to start from the inside out. You are the architect of your own identity. You own your actions. And remember, the real goal isn't just to get success, it's to become the kind of person who naturally attracts it.